Hello, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts Podcast. The Odd Thoughts Podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 48. For episode 48, I wanted to start off by talking about letting go of the past. There is inevitable experiences that we'll have going through our lives, and certain experiences will hold certain of your burdens and certain hardships on us, and it's important to move on and let go of those things without forgetting anything. And it's easier said than done, but it's important to forgive and move on. Then I wanted to have a little fun talking about some families in horror. I kind of compiled my own list, loosely picking out some acting families or families that have multiple actors in them that have done horror movies. And I mean, I kind of loosely interpreted that. They're not known for horror movies necessarily. Some of them are, but I just had some fun thinking about some families that have all participated in horror movies together. Then I wanted to transition into talking a little bit about exercise. It's something I think that we all can relate to wanting to exercise, or some of us are better about doing it than others. And I'm someone that wants to exercise really badly, especially as I've kind of started taking this journey and trying to be healthier and, keep my weight under control. But exercise, I lack a lot of motivation with that stuff. And I just wanted to talk about all the things that I do like about it. Then, lastly, I wanted to end it on talking about an article I had read. It was from CNN talking about the first ever fossilized dinosaur that was ever discovered, and it was the Megalosaurus, or first ever dinosaur that they discovered through the few fossils they found. And it was discovered in the early 1800s, and how recent paleontology has been in general is pretty amazing. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that. So if you want to listen to any of those topics, please continue listening. I appreciate y'all stopping by as always. I hope y'all enjoy. Please enjoy, even if you don't enjoy all the topics, enjoy something. Before we hop into the episode, how's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing okay. I'm doing okay. We're hopping into episode 48. I'm going to do a couple more episodes before I take a little bit of a break. In all honesty, I'm just trying to figure out a new way of doing the podcast, and I understand I don't mind how long the podcasts are. I really don't. But sometimes I think I can keep it within an hour, and talked about way long ago, many, many episodes ago, doing 45 to an hour. But I know that based off of the amount of topics I talk about and all the things that I kind of delve into, it kind of goes a little longer than that. And I can't escape that sometimes. And I don't mind talking about things, and I don't mind, divulging into topics, but I just think I probably can do a little bit better with things. And maybe even one thing is shortening the intro, right now. I want to keep the, hello, hello, friends, my whole reviewing or outlining what I'm going to talk about type thing. But, I like asking how y'all are doing, but kind of just this whole intro part where I kind of just do this little feel. I want to get better at doing it. And, talking about my recent feelings, I don't always know how to compile that. And I don't always want to talk about my feelings necessarily. So I just think about that first topic being, or this intro being something just really free forming off the top, just talk about whatever. And so I'm kind of thinking about just putting it out of the intro and just using that as my introduction into the podcast in general. You know what I'm saying? Where I don't know. Maybe I'm confusing myself a little bit, but I like having the intro be its intro, just do review the episode and how's everybody doing? Everybody doing okay? I'm doing okay. Let's go ahead and hop into the episode and then just kind of do that. And then maybe the first topic or the first thing I talk about is just, something a little more easy where I can kind of let it go, free flow. But I'm just, like I said, I'm just trying to figure that out. So I'm going to get up to episode 50 and I'm going to stop. And I'm also I'm losing interest with the podcast, and I can't sit there and deny that. And I want to keep doing it because it does give me some confidence to get on the microphone, and it keeps me accountable to upload, and it makes me want to do things and, and do content and do more. But my mind just kind of drifts to other things, and I want to I want to like write and I want to like do art and stuff like that. And I know that I'm not a great multitasker sometimes. So when I kind of constantly have the podcast in the back of my head, and it kind of makes me stop doing other things. It's lame, but it's whatever. Yeah. But like I said, I'm gonna get up to episode 50 and then we'll move on from there. But let's go ahead and move on with the episode. Let's go ahead and hop into episode 48. Time is a continual force that doesn't stop for anyone. The only thing that we're really destined to do is live our lives to the eventual end. There is definitely a purpose that can be found with our existences, and experiences will undoubtedly affect who we are and how we function. Certain moments in time stick out to us and have a potential to affect us for a certain prolonged period of time. These past experiences may take a hold on oneself and hold a certain heavy burden to our future existences. It's hard to feel like we are doing what's needed to continue in our lives when there's a constant remembrance of those past traumas, of those terrible past experiences. The imprints can be long lasting. Whatever ways, people handle themselves, there are different ways we handle ourselves. And there's different ways we navigate those certain experiences. And each way we remember them and how each person remembers those experiences is unique to them. But one iota remains true, and that is to try and let go of those bad experiences. We want to remember the good times, but when we have certain bad experiences from the past, we want to try to let those experiences go. To just say to let go of things is easier said than done. The weight of memories and the weight of experiences can be very hard to shed, and it takes time to lose that burden, to take time to lift that weight off yourself. Letting go of the past will offer a way to continue onwards and, remove yourself from those past hardships and give you a knowledge to handle future moments. Letting go isn't forgetting, maybe necessarily, but more so forgiving and like moving forward. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot, it's undoubtable that there are going to be things that happen through our lives, whether it's under our own, control or out of our own control, that will leave a certain imprint on us. Certain experiences that shape how we continue to experience life. It's hard to escape the past sometimes. It's really easy to live in the past. And when you're trying to move on from some sort of heavy burden, there's those certain traumatic experiences and those certain memorable experiences will pop up, and it feels like that's an inevitable thing for a lot of people. And it's so hard to say like a blatant statement and like saying like, "Oh, I just need to let go of what happened to me," or I just need to move on, or telling someone that this is not that simple. you know Undoubtedly there is a it's not being able to let go of the past is this inability to move on. You can't move on. And it's hard to change every single little bit of your inner brain workings, you know what I'm saying? It's hard to pinpoint every specific thing that's reciprocal to those experiences, and all those things that are direct responses to those traumatic things. It's hard to pinpoint all those things specifically. So to like just change your brain altogether and, you know, push things out of your mind is it's hard to do. And negative experiences take a lot of processing. I think that's what kind of makes it maybe more memorable, is that there's a lot more energy that goes into things. Just as like everything else in your life, when it takes a little more effort or there's a lot more that goes into it, it's a lot more memorable. Things stick out in that way. So, it's a little more, the bad experience is more memorable because of how much more energy and how much more processing you're doing. And, at times when some of these, heavy things land on you and you've been burdened and have these hardships, it can make you feel very weak. It makes you feel incapable because it's like, why can't I handle these things? Or maybe I was able to handle this thing before or other things. And it's like, why can't I do it now? A little embarrassing at times too. Not saying you should be embarrassed by it. You shouldn't be. Like I say, a lot of things are out of your control. So to say like, it's embarrassing to fail, and it's or like not necessarily fail, but it's embarrassing to have like certain things happen to you, even if it's out of your control. Also, sometimes makes you feel useless, and that's a very big thing. It just like makes you feel worthless, and when things happen to you and it's kind of out of your control, and you feel like you should have been able to handle it, it just offers this whole encompassing feeling of shame and guilt and embarrassment and weakness, but you shouldn't feel that way. We all are just really all are experiencing hardships at different times, and some people are really good at masking it and some people not so much. And sometimes from thing to thing, it's easier to, handle those things. But you don't want to hold on to anything. Like I said, letting go isn't forgetting, but it's forgiving and moving on. Understanding that there are things that happen, things will inevitably go wrong sometimes. It's just like sometimes I sit and I wonder like when the next bad thing is going to happen. That's just a paranoid way of thinking, and that's how I think sometimes. And I don't want to think like that at all, but it's a very real thing to realize that there are some bad things that will happen. And you got to sometimes separate that emotional attachment from those past experiences. You know what I'm saying? It's like the only way you're going to be able to move on is realize that you felt a way in that moment, but because you feel that way again, because you're going to get angry again and you're going to be sad again, that doesn't need to bring up those past things that it makes I'm not trying to play light of it too much, but it always reminds me of a joke that Dane Cook made where he talks about like sometimes you just need to cry, right? And like, you won't cry at work, but once you get home, you close the door, you just start bawling your eyes out and you'll just start remembering like random things of the past, right? And that's a very real thing is like you get upset with things, you start, you cry or you get mad or something like that. And it just rehashes all these things and you kind of feed into that thing. You have to like you gotta somehow reestablish your relationship with the past, right? It's kind of one of those things where it's like you gotta, rearrange how you thought of the past at one time and realize that, if this thing happened and I need to move on. It's a very fine line between recognizing negatives and like forgiving yourself to move on, it's kind of this thing where like negatives aren't always because of you. Certain experiences is because you let yourself down. Some things just happen that way, right? Bad things just happen. Things just go wrong sometimes. So when you have these negative experiences, you kind of have to separate that between like from yourself that, I didn't necessarily do it intentionally. And just because these things happen doesn't mean that future experiences are going to be that way. And so it's you gotta kind of like break the tether in a way, right? you know, you're losing yourself in that emotion when you're constantly thinking of like of those past experiences and associating it with the negatives, right? You're constantly feeding into that and losing yourself into that mentality. But it's hard to just move on. It really is. It's hard to just simply say like you need to move on. You could say that, but that's just a statement. That's not doing anything for anybody. But it's a real thing to say that you need to move on. Like I said, it's not forgetting, it's forgiving and moving forward. That's what letting go of the past is. And so what's moving on? Like, what does it look like? What are we doing when we're moving on, right? We recognize that, negatives happen, right? That's the whole thing is that negatives will happen whether we like it or not, and whether we're, in control or not. And so you don't need to blame yourself, you don't need to blame others either. That's the whole thing is like you don't need to blame yourself all the time, and you especially don't need to blame others. I confused myself with the writing. Sorry. That's one of those things where like, once it's a common thing I think sometimes is like I sometimes will think about it that way where like I don't think maybe people are necessarily doing things purposely on me, but like I'm upset about a certain situation and I think it's because people are doing it or it's because of XYZ and it's not because, I'm just taking the blame off myself. You want to avoid making yourself a victim. It's like the whole thing is like you don't want to be a victim to that like past, right? You want to kind of take it for yourself and like, say like, hey, this did happen to me, but it's not stopping me because you don't want to feed into the victimhood. And there's definitely a certain accountability that you have to take in that, this bad thing happened to me and I realize it. And even if it wasn't my fault, it wasn't anybody else's fault too. Sometimes things just happen. And I also think it's kind of weird to say like, because sometimes people do things onto you and unexpected circumstances pop up, but in the long run of like moving on, it's like you kind of have to just drop that idea of that anything really ever happened, that you did have that in a negative experience, but you just got to chalk it up to being like a bad thing, at least, just one moment in life, right? Not that it's always going to happen when you run into these circumstances, or you're not, that you're always going to handle it this bad way when something negative happens. You got to kind of let go of that. It's hard to say that though, like I said, you gotta it's really like you gotta let yourself be the one to define yourself. You're the one that takes control of how you react to things, and you can't let other people get to you, and you can't freak out about every single situation because at the end of the day, obviously you're the one that's gonna feel your emotions, right? So you have to take control of how you react, and you can't let yourself be defined by how people push you to a certain circumstance, or those traumas that are done onto you by other people. Or just like I said, when the random negative things, when certain circumstances that were unforeseen at first happen, it just happens that way. You're the one that has to continue. Unfortunately, you're left with dealing with that experience, and working and processing through that experience. But you have to take control, and you have to avoid certain distractions when you're focusing on that kind of stuff. And there's so many, like I said, you can get into that victimhood mentality and blame XYZ and ABC and MNO or whatever, but you're gonna have to work through it yourself. And I guess maybe one way is like you have to forgive yourself. Like I said, it's forgiving and moving forward. So big thing is, like, you have to forgive yourself and realize that you're not always going to be sharp and in tune with how to handle things. You got to stop blaming yourself, and it's only letting yourself down when you're blaming yourself and you're constantly setting that guilt. You know what I'm saying? You're just letting yourself down, and it's an inevitable thing. And like I said, it's like eventually you're going to have to work through that thing. So even if you move on from blaming yourself, you might blame other people, and that's not the way to do it either. There's definitely like people form, I think, like a certain sense of identity when it comes to like maintaining problems. Our experiences are very much so like who we are, and what we go through shapes the way that we are. So people have to be able to handle those things, and it gives you a sense of who you are 100% when you understand that you can handle certain problems and you can process certain things. It lets you know what you're capable of. It's hard to separate yourself when you're stuck in a problem. It's hard to like just step back or step to the side and move on from something when you're actively struggling. That's a big thing, is like, you want to be able to handle it, right? So like you feel like if you let go of something or you stop it for the moment, it's just going to continue on bad. So it's like, but then like as you go a little further, you get a little more stuck in a problem, then it becomes even harder to separate yourself from that problem. But inevitably, solving those things and processing that stuff, experience only helps shape you. It doesn't necessarily define you, I guess, right? I guess more so. It does define you as a whole based off of how you respond more so, I guess. I guess that's really what it is more so. Each single experience and, a moment in your life isn't exactly a teller of who you are, but how you're handling it and how you process it and how you shape it into the whole of who you are is what defines you. We all have attachments to past experiences. I think that's a really real thing. And like I say, I keep trying to reiterate, is letting go is not forgetting. It's just releasing expectations of change, or releasing expectations of how you're going to handle maybe future things that are similar to past experiences, and just forgiving yourself and just realizing that you're going to handle things how you're going to handle it. And it could be it could be all determined on just having a bad day or having a good day, or you know uncertain unseen circumstances, or based off a certain perceived capability and perceived want to handle something. It's at the end of the day, you're gonna have to distance yourself from those experiences, and even though they're very real to you, that's how you're gonna have to that's the only way to letting go, is distancing yourself from those things. You need to appreciate the present. That's the whole thing, is appreciate the now. And even when things happen, you kind of have to appreciate that, like, this is only happening in the moment, in this one present time. And then when you work through it, and hopefully you can work through it, you realize that there's good times that come, there's these times of relief afterwards. and appreciate those times. Just stop. It's a big thing I always try to tell myself, and that's a big thing is like I have a certain perception of how I think things should go of myself and how I should handle something. And so when it doesn't go well, I've often judged myself very harshly on that. And I really had to tell myself a lot to stop thinking of how things should be, but more of what they are. I should stop having this. It's okay to picture like a better thing and a better scenario and da 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 da. But it's one of those things where it's gonna have to just be. So the experience is gonna have to fold out nonetheless, and you're just gonna have to kind of deal with it. It's kind of the beautiful thing of life a little bit is that everybody's going through a different experience, and some look similar. And if you look at like a broad stroke and you look at the world as a whole, there's a lot of people who go through a lot of the same things, but everybody's journey is a little unique to them. And we're all going to go through past experiences, though, and certain heavy ones that are, unpleasurable and traumatic and stuff like that. Or, we're just going to feel like there's certain experiences from our past that just left us in a little bit of a weakened state or whatever. But it's important to let go of those moments and realize that, yeah, you're gonna go through future experiences that are not so pleasant, but you're also gonna go through a lot that are, and you're gonna form a certain self, you know a certain concept of self through those problems and in the way you handle them. And I think, like I said, I always say, letting go isn't forgetting, but it's forgiving and moving forward. It's important to let go and just understand that things will happen and you're just doing your best at all times. I feel like I'm always kind of saying this, but I'm a big fan of horror, like scary movies, scary stories, horror art, that stuff in general. I like scary things. Yeah, and I react very much so to scary things. It's not like I'm a super brave person, I'm very much so I get affected by horror. But I like it nonetheless. But recently I was just kind of pondering upon, podcast topics, always trying to figure out new things and it's hard to sometimes separate myself from the film thing because I do love movies and I feel like I'm a fan of the things I'm a fan of, right? You can't help but enjoy that kind of stuff. But one thing I feel like that's not just unique to horror movies, but something you'll see a lot in the horror genre is that actors will get a lot of their starts in horror movies. And sometimes, if there's acting families, you know what I'm saying? If there's families that multiple people in that family participate in acting, inevitably they'll probably do a couple horror movies, not together necessarily, but them themselves will do horror movies. And I'm someone that I love kind of the continuity stuff. I love like looking at, like, oh, I recognize this person from this movie, or oh, that's kind of funny that they played this character and da 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 da. And one of my favorite things is like when you notice like a certain actor that has a parent that acted or something like that, do a horror movie just as like their parent did. So that got me kind of thinking. That's one of my favorite making like connections between movies like that. I play a game called 6 Degrees of Separation or it's called like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, 6 Degrees of Owen Wilson. I've heard it called like 100 different things. That's making connection between actors. And I love that kind of game. So I was kind of playing with that idea and I thought it'd be fun to kind of go over some families in horror, kind of like a loose thing where acting families that have all participated in some way in the horror genre. You know what I'm saying? To varying levels. I kind of picked some that are, not known for horror, but they've done horror movies. I've done some that are kind of more like known for horror movies. But I thought it was funny. And like I said, it's not like it. Not all of them are like I said. Families in horror. I didn't want to say horror families because that implies that like, the families just involves himself in the horror genre. But I took an approach that some of the families are kind of known for that, but not necessarily. But I came up with seven of them. I was originally going to do eight. One of them was going to be Stephen King and his sons, but they deserve their own thing. It's like I was looking up all this stuff with Stephen King, and like I should do like a topic on him alone. Yada yada. But I came up with seven. And it's some of the like I say, it's like I had some fun with it. So just come along with me for the fun. But number one on the list is definitely I consider like a horror family, like definitely involved very much so in the horror genre, and that's the Dorif family. Brad Dourif, very much so known and famous for being Chucky in the Child's Play, the whole Chucky series. But he's also done a few other things. He was in the third Exorcist movie. He was also in the fourth Critters movie. He was in that movie Urban Legends. If you've ever seen Urban Legends, or Urban Legend is what it's called, it's got like Jared Leto in it, dude. It's a good movie, and it's literally it's a slasher movie about urban legends. Da da da. He was also in the Halloween remake. He plays Sheriff Brackett, which is pretty awesome. And but I don't want to just limit it to that. Limit it to that. Limit it to that. He's also been in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was his first movie, and he was nominated for an Academy Award for that movie. He was also in Heaven's Gate. He's also in the original Dune, and then the Lord of the Rings. He was in the Lord. He was I can't remember. Whatever. But anyways, very much so involved in the horror genre. Very famous for horror movies, and specifically for Chucky. I think that's the one that everybody kind of remembers. But his daughter's name is Fiona Dourif, and she's done some horror movies too. Specifically, she's done the Chucky franchise with him, or they did Curse of Chucky, Cult of Chucky, and then the Chucky TV show together. And the Curse of Chucky came out after like the Seed of Chucky. It was kind of a dead period for the Chucky franchise, and then the Curse of Chucky is really good. The Cult of Chucky is really good, and the TV show is really good too. But she plays a separate character that eventually gets possessed by Charles Lee Ray, which is who possessed Chucky. Da da da. Which is pretty great. So she in the show she plays her dad, like she like acts like dude. It's pretty funny. It's kind of a good little meta thing. It's pretty good. But other movies she's been is the Messenger. She's been in The Master. She was in 8 episodes of True Blood and then 5 episodes of The Purge TV show. So she's done a little of everything. She's been around just like anybody. But that's the perfect one because I consider Brad Dourif very much so ingrained in like the horror genre, and like just seeing his daughter do the same thing, and they look alike, and they're very good with in Chucky together, and it's pretty funny seeing them interact. But yeah, that's just a good number one because I very much so think of them as in the horror genre. Number two I have is the Arquettes, specifically David Arquette, Patricia Arquette, and then Alexis Arquette. David Arquette, I think of him kind of more specifically having done horror movies. If you want to consider Buffy the Vampire Slayer a horror kind of action teen whatever movie, but he was in that, and then he was very famously was in Scream. That's kind of the one that everybody thinks of. He was Officer Dewey. Sorry, not Doofy. That's in the scary movie. But he's Officer Dewey. And then he was in a movie called Ravenous. He's also in Riding the Bullet, which is a Stephen King short story. I don't think it's a novel. I think it's a short story. And then he directed a movie called The Tripper. And then he was also in 12-Hour Shift. 12-Hour Shift's a really good movie. It's about like a nursing staff at a local small town hospital that steals people's organs to feed like a drug. It's pretty good. But he's most famous for Scream. And a couple of the other movies he's done is like Never Been Kissed. He was also in like Shark Boy and Lava Girl. He's done a couple just like random bits in here and there, but I really think of him in Scream. Maybe it's because I'm a Scream fan, so that's kind of like what I mostly picture. But he's it's not the only one in his family, and it's kind of funny. I kind of forget that he has siblings, and that's maybe a little bit of like ignorance on my part. But he has three sisters. One of them very famously Patricia Arquette. She's famous. She was in the third Nightmare on Elm Street. That's the one I always kind of think of. But she also did Night Watch. She was also in one episode of Tales of the Crypt, like Once Upon a Time. And she also did like that TV show Medium, which is not really horror necessarily, but you could say is like horror adjacent. She's also done things like True Romance, Ed Wood, Lost Highway. I've never heard that one. Little Nicky, and then Holes. She was kissing Kate Bar. I just watched Holes recently, so but I always think of her in Nightmare on Elm Street 3. That's the one I specifically think of. And she plays Kristen Parker, I think is like her name. Kristen's her name. But what's kind of dumb about that character? She's great in it, but in the third, the fourth, and fifth movie, it's all the same characters. It's the same leading person as Kristen as the character, but it's played by different actresses in each one. You know, Patricia Arquette was on to bigger, better things after that Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And I suggest everybody go watch that and just go watch all the movies she's done. Like I love Little Nicky. I literally watched Holes like a couple of days ago, and I love that movie. And then they had he has one other sister, I forget her name, but the one that's done horror as well, that's kind of acted as well, is Alexis Arquette. Alexis Arquette was one time a man became a woman, very famously. Kind of is I think was kind of known for that, and like well known for being like a good person too, and yada yada yada. But apparently had like a bit part in Buffy. Was in Children of the Corn 5, but kind of famously was in Bride of Chucky, which is kind of funny. He plays the she plays the boyfriend of Tiffany, or like I don't know if they're boyfriend or and girlfriend. I think she's just kind of using him or whatever. But he's like that goth dude, that gets electrocuted, or no, smothered. She gets electrocuted. He gets smothered. So pretty gnarly, pretty cool too. But he's done like some pretty good movies that I didn't realize. He did like The Wedding Singer, which is I know that like very funny in that. But Of Mice and Men, he was in Of Mice and Men, and he's kind of a main character in that. And then he also did Pulp Fiction, and that's a bit part. He comes out the bathroom in the apartment, with the gun. He starts shooting like pow pow pow, and it misses Vincent and Jules, and then they like shoot him. That's that's Alexis Arquette. But I literally forget the other sister's name, and that's pretty dumb of me. I should have looked it up, but I just kind of didn't think about it. I just kind of think of David, Patricia, and Alexis. But we'll move on. They're very talented. I suggest go watching all those movies they're involved in, horror or not. You know what I'm saying? The next one on my list, number three, is kind of loose. This one is a little bit of a loose one, just kind of like the Arquettes are. This one's a little loose. It's the Bacons, Kevin Bacon, and then his daughter Sosie Bacon. Kevin Bacon was in the first Friday the 13th. He is kind of like one of the best like kills in that movie. But he also did Tremors, which is it's a horror adjacent movie. He did Flatliners, which is a pretty good movie. And then he was also in Hollow Man, which is basically just like the Invisible Man. So very much so has kind of done the horror genre, has kind of played into the horror genre, and has kind of done other things as well, kind of around that. I think in the horror genre, I just those are the ones that specifically stand out. But very famous for doing like Animal House, Footloose, JFK, Apollo 13, and Mystic River, which is kind of a suspense, movie, right? Kind of. And I love that though. Mystic River is a very sad movie. It's a very heart wrenching if you ever want to watch that. Kevin Bacon plays a really good character in that. But Friday the 13th, it has like probably the most memorable kill in that first one besides Jason's mom at the end. Spoiler alert: Jason's mom is the killer in Friday the 13th. But and then I also concluded it's Sedgwick, which is his wife. But okay. So, but first daughter, Sosie Bacon. She was in the Scream TV show, which is I didn't know. She did 13 episodes of the show 13 Reasons Why as well. Sorry, I stuttered there a little bit. And that's not really horror, but that kind of has that suspense vibe too. But famously, she was in Smile. And if you ever want to watch that movie, go creep yourself out watching that movie. That movie is so good, and especially when they reveal like the thing behind all the people getting possessed with dude. It's pretty creepy. And then she also did a TV show called Mayor of Easttown, which I think takes place in like Pennsylvania, like Pittsburgh area, which is where Mystic River takes place. I'm pretty sure. So, which is pretty funny. But she's up and coming, so that's just like the only few things she's done so far. You know what I'm saying? But I'm also got to include Kira Sedgwick, which is Sosie's mom and Kevin's wife, and me and her have the same birthdays. Shout out August 19th. I always say that she's literally the one person I remember that has the same birthday as me too, because I love her. Like I watched The Closer for many years. That was like the show she was on. But she did things like Born on the Fourth of July. These are not horror movies. Born on the Fourth of July's singles, and then she did a TV show called Another World. Never heard of those, but the horror movie she did was called The Possession. I think that one had Javier Bardem, or is it Jeffrey Dean Morgan? They look alike. I'm so dumb. I should have looked that up too. Like, but it's like they find like a little like it's like a little like a music box that's possessed, and like they open it up at their house, and their daughter becomes possessed. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Um, yeah, it's just funny because I don't think of them at all. Like I don't think of Kevin Bacon as a horror movie, actor, like having acted in horror movies, but Friday the 13th, Tremors, Flatliners, Hollow Man, that's a few. And Kira Cedric just doing one. I just had to throw it in. I felt like, I was reaching, I'm reaching, this whole list is reaching, so I felt like I needed to throw it in there. But next on the list, we'll move on. Number four, I had is the Lees. Jamie Lee Curtis, and her mom, Janet Lee. Jamie Lee Curtis very famously was Laurie Strode in Halloween. Very much so was famous for that. But at that time it was doing like a lot of those kind of slasher or like horror movies. She did like Prom Night and Terror Train, which are both kind of slasher movies. And she also did The Fog, which is a very good movie. And all in that kind of like early, like late 70s, early 80s, like all within 5 years. She's famous for doing things like Freaky Friday, True Lies. She was in My Girl, which is a sad movie. Fish Named Wanda, Trading Places. Very famous for everything else, but I always think of Halloween. I'm always going to remember her as Laurie Strode in Halloween. And also, I've watched Terror Train. I watched Prom Night. I think I've definitely watched a remake of Prom Night with Brittany Snow. But I think I remember watching the original one. And The Fog. The Fog is a really good one. They remade it from the with the dude from Smallville, I think, like 20 years ago. Yada yada. But her mom very famously has also been involved in the horror genre. Janet Lee is her name. She was very famous for being in Psycho. She's also done movies called Night of the Lepus, which I think is also called Rabbits. I don't know. She was also in The Fog as well, and she did Halloween H2O with Jamie Lee Curtis with her daughter. She's like the secretary. They like bump into each other, and she gets scared, and that's pretty funny. But she's very famous for doing Psycho. It's the famous like fake out. It kind of led this whole thing with in the horror genre where they hire like very famous actresses or actors to die at the beginning of the movie. And she was that. She dies in the first 15 minutes of Psycho, but she has the shower scene. She's like the original Scream Queen, as Jamie Lee Curtis is one of those as well. Like so, like daughter, like like mother, like daughter type thing. It kind of just passed down, and she's done some other roles. She's done Little Women. She did the 1949 version. She did like Angels in the Outfield and stuff like that. She did Houdini, things like that. So she's famous. Obviously, she's been around, and she was famous when she did Psycho. But I just laugh at that. That one's kind of a stretch a little bit. Jamie Lee Curtis is very much so known for horror, but maybe her mom a little bit of a stretch, kind of. I'll try to fly through the next couple. So number five I have is the Farmigas. Really, just Vera Farmiga and her sister Thaisa Farmiga. Both of them, they look exactly alike, so it's very funny. But very very talented, very beautiful women. Vera Farmiga though, very famous for The Conjuring, but also she was an orphan, The Orphan, and I love that movie. And they just made the second one like a year or two ago. She wasn't in it, but it's still good. It's still a good franchise to watch. The Conjuring, she's Lorraine Warren in The Conjuring, very famous for that. Excuse me. She also did things like The Departed, The Manchurian Candidate, Bates Motel, which is horror adjacent as well. Roar, which is a TV show she did. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which is a fantastic movie. But also, I mean, also The Departed is a good movie. The Manchurian Candidate, that's Denzel Washington, very good. He's very fantastic, and I think like you could tell she like expands this beyond horror, but like very much sells the horror genre when she's in it. And I just want Conjuring movies to keep coming out. And that documentary that was talking about like the one case that the third movie was based off of like the switched possession thing, and it was like the only murder case in U.S. history that was acquitted due to possession. Even though that documentary kind of came out calling out the Warrens, it made me feel a little bit weird, but I still want to watch the Conjurings and I still care about the Warrens. But her sister Thaisa Farmiga, I don't Thaisa. I'm sorry if I say that wrong, but she's done the Nun, which is a part of the Conjuring universe. She did Mindscape, and then American Horror Story, which she's done like multiple of the series that they put out, as well as We Have Always Lived in This Castle. I don't think those. I think those are all horror movies or horror adjacent. And then she's done things like the Gilded Age TV show, which I've never seen. But very much so looks like her sister, very talented as well, diving into the horror genre, and it's kind of cool to see. I don't think it'll happen because I think the Nun takes place like before the Warrens start doing their thing, so I don't think we'll ever see. Or maybe I'm dumb and I just don't know that they've been on camera together. I'm just dumb probably, but she's talented as well. Farmigas are good. We'll move on to the next one. Keep it moving. So I got two more. But these last two are they're ingrained more in the horror genre than most others. Number six I have is the Cronenbergs. David Cronenberg and his son Brandon Cronenberg. Both of them do directing and have done like a little acting, but if you ever watch a David Cronenberg, you definitely will know if you're watching a David Cronenberg movie because it'll make you feel uncomfortable as hell. He's done things like Shivers, as well as The Dead Zone, but most famously doing movies like Videodrome, Scanners, The Fly, just to name a few. And like, if you ever watch like The Fly or like Scanners is a big Scanners is a whole movie of people's heads just exploding. So if you ever want to watch that, go watch that. But he's absolutely fantastic practical horror, body horror. And his son does very much so the same thing. Brandon Cronenberg, he's done three kind of, I think three movies so far, or at least three kind of popular ones. It was Antiviral, Possessor, and an Infinity Pool. Infinity Pool is a newer one and has Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgård in it. But I think that one is about like you can like there's like like a secret island that rich people can go to where you can like clone yourself and like kill or like clone yourself and kill yourself basically. That's kind of a good idea. I think that's what it's about. And then antiviral I think is about like people there's this laboratory where people can go into and like inject themselves with diseases of their favorite celebrities or something like that. It's freaking it's Cronenberg-esque. It's literally like so funny how they both just feed into that weirdness. One more. I'll make it quick. Last one, very much so famous, is the Cheneys, Lon Chaney Jr. I felt I had to throw in like a classic horror like people. Lon Chaney Sr., the senior Chaney, he's famous for Phantom of the Opera. I think that's kind of like the one really famous horror role that he did. But he also did like A Blind Bargain, The Monster, The Unknown, London After Midnight. He's the man of a thousand faces. That's also what his nickname is. So if you ever heard that reference, that's Lon Chaney. He's directed a lot of movies. He's done other things outside of the horror genre, like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, He Who Gets Slapped, and The Miracle Man. I've never seen those, but I've seen the original Phantom of the Opera, and I have seen The Monster as well. I think, but he was the man. He like kind of pioneered that whole thing, the silent era of horror movies. And if you ever watch like him, he's very creepy. He kind of himself, he has a very distinct look. And then his son, Lon Chaney Jr., famous for doing like The Wolfman, Ghost of Frankenstein, The Mummy's Tomb, Son of Dracula. He's literally portrayed the Wolfman, Frankenstein, and Dracula. Not a lot of people can say that, but he's famous for a lot of other things. He's done like Of Mice and Men, like the older version of the Mice and Men, the Defiant Ones, High Noon. So famous nonetheless. Both men very famous, but I suggest, I love going back and watching those like black and white old Universal monster movies because there's so much that we just don't know in the horror genre. And I literally plead to like the horror gods that we get good remakes of the dark Universal monster movies. Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein. We get good remakes one day. But who knows? I would love to remake one of those movies. But yeah, nonetheless, I'm done talking about. I spent a pretty good, healthy amount of time on this topic, but I love horror movies, and like I said, I left out Stephen King because I think he deserved his own thing, and his sons too. But I love watching horror movies. I'm very much so always watching scary movies, and I love watching that kind of those little like continuity things where it's like, parents and, children and parents acting in horror movies maybe together or just in their own separate franchises and not necessarily even just in that, but like TV shows and anything like that's kind of fun. And I like making those connections. But there's plenty of other people who have done that kind of stuff and have popped up in horror movies. And further down the road, like I said, I'll probably expand on all that. And I'm never going to stop talking about horror movies in general. So recently, I've been like for the last few weeks, I've been eating better. I've been like cooking my own food and stuff like that. And I've enjoyed it very much so. It's kind of in this whole effort to, maintain my weight mostly, but just trying to live a little better. I'm not, old or anything like that, but I don't want to have any health problems as I get older. And this is kind of the time I think in like my life or in like a lot of people's lives where it's kind of like this is when health should be taken most important. Should always be taken importantly, but this is a time when it can be kind of crucial. I think to the rest of my life. if I don't start doing things now, then it might hurt me in the long run. So I've started with the eating better. That's one thing. I've been eating less too, not overstuffing myself. So a general, caloric, deficit helps you with losing weight to an extent. But furthering that, I know that I need to do a little bit more with like not only losing, like right now it's about maintaining weight. Like I don't want to just I reached like 230 and I've gotten past 230 recently. That's kind of why I was starting to eat better. Well, it's just kind of big for me. If I was muscular in 230 and 240 or whatever, like that would be great. But I'm not muscular. I'm pudgy, so I need to like not be that much, or I just that's the whole thing is it's just to kind of lose a little bit, maintain it, get it back to a maybe a regulated, not a healthy level necessarily, eventually a healthy level, but regulated at first. But eventually, I'm going to have to push my, what I do. I'm going to have to further that. And the only way, I mean, literally the only way I can think of is exercise. I know I've probably talked about exercise in past episodes 100%, but it's a very real thing that and I love this is what I get so caught up in it because like I like exercising. That's one of those things where I think it's cool, but I don't have a motivation for it based off of what? Laziness? Sure, a little bit of that. Confidence. I don't feel a lot of confidence, so it's like what's the point type thing, even though there's more than a point just to look good, but so many things I think I just like I tell myself and it just blocks me from doing it. But I know that sometimes I do partake in it, especially when I'm at home. Like in my room, I have two dumbbells. I'm literally looking at them right now, sitting on the floor. A little dust on them. I mean, I ain't gonna lie. I do lift them every once in a while. I do lift them every few days. It feels like that's not enough to do anything, but it's a little bit of something. It gets me at least thinking about like with exercise. It makes me think about what I'm truly interested in with exercising because like going to a gym isn't a bad idea, but very intimidated just around a lot of people in general. Not in the factor of like I feel like I'll look lame or something like that, or I feel like people are going to be laughing at me or something. But it's more in the vein of like I just don't want to be seen by people, and I get very I don't know I get my social battery drains really fast. So being around a lot of people at a gym just doesn't feel very comforting to me. And I want to be comfortable when I work out, even when, because I'm going to be uncomfortable doing the physical activities. So, I want to be comfortable in doing the uncomfortable physical activities, yada, yada. So, I have dumbbells and I make sure I do multiple reps, enough, actual like, sets to make it feel like I'm actually getting some sort of workout in and feel like I got some sort of like, burn, not to where like I'm super sore and I can't lift anything anymore, but, I got to make sure I'm moving a little bit. I also do a little shadow boxing in my room. Very minimal shadow boxing, but you can break up a nice little sweat just like throwing punches at the air, man. It's surprising, just getting your arms moving real fast. But I do that a lot. And I think about like I said, I think about what I like as in exercising and I like to keep it pretty private and there's a lot of things I can do on my own with like dumbbells. Like if I bought a few different ranging weights, then I really feel like I can get a bigger scope and there are plenty of exercises that I know that I can do, but I do know that it also limits me on certain things. Like I know there's probably certain exercises I can do for my chest with dumbbells, right? But there's other things that are better for my chest, like push-ups and something like that, or like going to bench something. So dumbbells are effective in some ways, but maybe not in all ways. So I know that limits me. And, I can sit there and I can shadow box all I want, but what does it do besides, burning up a sweat? I would like to like tone up my muscles as I maybe burn a sweat. So like think about running, even though running is kind of like is something that hurts my knees. It definitely does. Walking doesn't though. So it gets me, at least I know that I'm trying some things that are like, shifting into other things I know I'd want to do. I think it's like if I'm, active in any way, that's a good thing. That's kind of the whole way of looking at it is as long as I'm moving my body in some sort of way, I'm doing better than nothing, trying to tell myself that as much as possible. And as the weather gets nicer, I know that I'm gonna get outside more. I am. I mean, I can get outside now. The weather's not that bad, but I want to pick up golf again. I haven't played golf in a while. I've battled like a wrist injury for multiple years, and golf just hasn't been in the works for me, and I just haven't had like the love for it at some times. But I've recently gained back that interest, and I mean, going outside and swinging a club a few times is it's kind of worked myself up into a sweat. And if I go out a few weeks, a few times a week, and not just like out to a golf course, but out to a driving range. Let's just say that maybe one time on the weekend I go play 18 holes, and then two or three times throughout the week, Monday through Friday, or Monday through, also the weekends, just maybe you know what I'm saying. But like if I go out and hit some golf balls and play once a week, that's good enough. Like that's good. And then I throw in some weightlifting and I throw in some walks outside, and that's the whole thing is like it's just a little bit of everything. I just got to do a little bit of everything. I just get scared that I'm gonna get like bored. That's a big thing is that I do have interest in exercising, but I just don't want to do the same ones every day. And I know I can switch it up, but also then I feel like I'm like neglecting like certain exercises. Like if I focus just on legs, then I feel like I'm neglecting my arms, and then inevitably I'm gonna have to do my like arm circuit or whatever. I don't know. I just think like I wish there was like I don't want a fast tracked way. I just definitely do not want that. And just I just know that's not like fulfilling way, and it's not going to get me to the exact kind of way that I want things or whatever. So I don't want to be like that where it's like I want the fast tracked way. I'm not going to take no Ozempic or some bullshit. That stuff pisses me off a little bit. I mean, like do whatever you want for weight loss. If you want to lose weight and look good, that's cool, and I do too. But I ain't taking nothing like Ozempic. I ain't gonna. It's like I mean, I'll fast and stuff like that because that stuff feels more natural, and it feels like your body get rid of toxins or whatever. And I've done that stuff. That's something I've always kind of naturally done is like fasted. Now I've consistently started eating like 2 meals a day, so it's like around like 11 or 12 or 11 or 1 o'clock between that. I feel like I want to eat something, and then I eat at night. But I used to just eat one meal, but then I would stuff myself, and that was like, and then it was unhealthy shit. It was like fast food. So that was doing me in quicker than anything else, for sure. You know what I'm saying? But exercise is something that I know that's going to take me to the next point. And I kind of get into the in between of like, I like the fact of losing weight. Like, I don't want to be 230, 240 unless I have like muscle. So that even puts it on myself is that I can turn this fat into muscle maybe. And I don't know how well, I don't know how quick, and I don't know how easy it is, but that's one of them things where it's like I don't want to be too skinny. So, but I do want muscle. But I also like if I'm gonna be 230, I need to have muscle. Or 240, I need to have muscle. Can't be flabby. I just like it's I was getting disgusted with myself. I'm usually disgusted with myself always, but it was getting too much. And I just like when certain shirts don't fit and certain pants don't fit, and it makes you feel weird. And you're like, I used to always fit into these things. It's whatever. I mean, it's like it's kind of weird to complain about, especially when like there's a lot of things that like I mean, I'm very much so in control of my body. I mean, like right now in my life, but there might be something that happens that will stop me from being able to do things. So it's kind of like I'm wasting away my body now, but not exercising it, but and not taking care of it. So like, like I said, I'm eating a little healthier. I'm cooking my own meals. I'm not stuffing my face with every meal. I'm full, but I'm not stuffed, right? Like, it's like I try not I make sure I'm not hungry, right? Make sure you eat enough. But like that's the whole thing is I also know I'm a kind of a big person. I'm a big guy, so it's like I can't just like eat, 1600 calories. I have to keep it around 2000, but just try not to go over that 2000 mark or whatever. 1800 to 2000 would be perfect for me. And that's what I do. I mean, it's like a lot of my stuff I eat is like rice and like literally for lunch I usually have like hummus and tuna and like some veggies I cut up like peppers, onions and jalapenos. And then for dinner it's rice and ground beef with those veggies. It just it gets very boring. It gets very boring, but I enjoy eating it, and it tastes good to me. It's kind of part of that comfort meal thing, which I'll probably talk about one day as like comfort meals. As I kind of delve into like more cooking and stuff like that. But exercise I think is something that everybody should do, right? It's something that I know I should do, but I just have to it's like with everything else, I need to have that motivation and just find the things that I like about exercising. And as long as I move in my body just a little bit, then that's better than nothing. I recently came across an article, or it was kind of like I say recently, but I think it was probably a few weeks ago. But recently, in quotations, I came across an article that was by CNN, and I don't necessarily know how credible CNN is always is, but nonetheless, they what they were talking about had some credibility. Um, it was an article that was talking about the first ever dinosaur fossil discovered. It was a huge fossilized bones that emerged from these slate quarries in England's Oxfordshire in the late 1600s, and eventually it would be coined the Megalosaurus. Sorry, I'm gonna have to say it slow like that a couple times, dude. But yeah, these bones that started coming from these quarries in the 1600s were at the time very like puzzling of a discovery, and the whole idea of dinosaurs and like evolution and its extinction of dinosaurs was literally an unknown concept at the time. And so paleontology wouldn't be popularized until the 17th century. So this article was just talking about that, was talking about the first kind of like complete fossil ever discovered, the Megalosaurus, the man that discovered it, kind of the whole, you know, initiation into paleontology and like the whole popularity increase and kind of where we are today. And I thought that was kind of fun to talk about. That's something I'm always interested in is learning a little bit about history and about the history of the world and just do my best to share a little bit of it. And it only gets me thinking about other things. So I just hope that it gets other people thinking as well. But let's see, where did I start? I kind of have it. It's kind of confusing on like some of the stuff I got written down. So I'm going to try my best to kind of divulge everything properly or whatever. But William Buckland, he's the guy that discovered the Megalosaurus, and he's like the first ever professor of geology at Oxford University, which is pretty amazing. He's the one that described and named the first known dinosaur, but his expertise and like how he knows things isn't really clear, which I think is pretty funny. Like he's an expert. We just don't know like what he became an expert. How he became an expert. Yada yada. But he was known as like a very ambitious and charismatic person, and he graduated from Oxford in 1804. But one of those things is like he just was like a man of all knowledges. He took a wide range of classes, and one of them including anatomy, or a bunch of them including anatomy. And I think that's what kind of got him interested in like ancient bones and stuff like that. Beyond just like geology of like finding like minerals and stones or whatever, just things that may be, else that might be there. And with like the discovery of the fossilized bones in the 1600s, that started getting the talk in the ether a little bit. And I think that's kind of what helped like make him interested in that. But he's let's see, he's a renowned, but in contact with other renowned natural scientists. Like he's like someone who like loved like learning from other people. He was someone. He used to be friends with this guy named George Cuvier, who's famous for comparing living animals to fossils. So finding these fossils, seeing the bone structures, relating it to some of the living animals that we have today, some of the similarities. You know what I'm saying? And I think William Buckland was the first to think what are happening with fossils that are dug up from quarries in Oxford, and the first one to kind of wonder like, why aren't we just studying them more and protecting them and preserving them and giving them more of like like more attention. So his research started by paying some local quarrymen for samples, just anything they find, come give it to me. And he started to kind of piece things together like a jigsaw, basically like a puzzle. And then yeah, and that's kind of how it happened. That literally is like I'll talk about like all the pieces in a second. I'm just kind of giving his background, I guess. I confused myself by putting it in the way that I did. I'm sorry. But yeah, in I guess 1824 is when he officially published the paper, like the like talking about what he's found and all the things he's found. And he had an assistant named Mary Moreland, who herself was a naturalist and was the illustrator of like the first picture of the Megalosaurus fossil that appeared in papers. He happened to marry her like a year after the paper was like published, which is funny. Um, but based off of the discoveries were very primitive, and it wasn't only till later after that paper was it recognized that most of the United Kingdom was once covered in ice sheets. You know what I'm saying? And so it kind of brought past that like idea that this permafrost has like buried these things for thousands and millions of years or whatever, which is crazy to think about. It's awesome to think about, like just like the oldness of this world, truly. And career ended prematurely after a mental breakdown, and he died in 1856 at an asylum in London. So not a great end, but he was known as like an ambitious and charismatic kind of like out there person. That's kind of the background on William Buckland, the guy who kind of was the first person to push the paleontology study and was the most interested in that, and was the one that first kind of asked that question of like, what are they doing with these fossils? And kind of started that whole movement, really, truly. But I guess so. Like I said, it's a little sporadic in the information. I wish I would have wrote it a little bit better, but um, the Megalosaurus fossil was based on a lower jaw vertebrae and limb bones. That was kind of the first fossils that were found for that. And the largest, they had like a large thigh bone that was 2 feet and 9 inches, and then 10 inches in circumference. And so that was the starting of the configurations for the Megalosaurus, or maybe the only pieces they really found. I don't know, but they named it the Megalosaurus, which I think means like great lizard, and they named it that in a scientific paper on February 20th, 1824. Um, and they found a few teeth as well, and based off the teeth shape, they presumed it to be a 40-foot carnivore, likely amphibious, or like maybe like semi-amphibious or whatever, which is pretty cool. But all that was kind of based off of just what they knew from animals, I'm assuming. Like the current animals that they had around them and what we have, they were kind of able to piece that together, which starts the whole conversation about evolution, really, right? And this guy named Steve Russotti, he was a paleontologist at the University of Edinburgh. Some things were right, but not all were right. I think it's kind of the whole thing is like that they got some of the stuff right with they were piecing some of the stuff right, but not all of it was right. I'm sorry, I'm literally confusing myself with like how weirdly I threw around all this information. But dinosaurs at the time were a very radical idea. You know, not as people nowadays, as growing up in like the modern generation, we know like what dinosaurs are based off of the zeitgeist and based off of all the stuff that like people have discovered, right? But at the time of Buckland, like when he discovered this stuff and all those people were starting the paleontology trend, nothing was known. There was literally dinosaurs were a non-existent thing, which is kind of crazy to think about how many million years old dinosaurs are, to think that they're only recently known in human history, which is pretty cool. And the word dinosaur came into term 20 years after those original discoveries. So, like in the 1840s and 1850s or whatever. So, at that time, nothing was known. And, like, we know what dinosaurs kind of are, not necessarily what they all look like and everything about them, but we know a lot about them now based off of all the research and, you know, TV shows, movies, all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of funny to think that nobody knew that about 150 years ago or 100, 200 years ago now. 1824 is literally 200 years ago. And that's amazing. And apparently the word dinosaur was coined uh, and by a man named, I'm sorry, I'm confusing. Yeah, okay. Coined by a dude named is a Richard or Ricard Owen. He was the founder of the Natural History Museum of London. He was the one that, claimed, who coined the phrase dinosaur, which is cool. And he based the name, I guess, on shared characteristics he had identified in his studies of the Megalosaurus and two other dinosaurs. Yeah, and the two other dinosaurs' names are the Iguanodon and the Hylosaur. Sorry, hold on. Hylosaurus. The Hylosaurus. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I might have put an extra letter in there. Those are scientific names. I'm not very good with. But those were like this discovered around the same times. Those fossils were discovered around the same time, and they were first described in 1825 and then 1833 in like that order. The iguanodon was like 1825, and then the other one was 1833. But the Megalosaurus paper cemented Buckland's like reputation in geology, and its significance is more apparent in retrospect. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like one of those things where it's I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like in antiquity we kind of appreciate based off all the discoveries we've all of a sudden made in the recent years and stuff like that. What else? I was confusing the hell out of myself. Um, There is no complete skeleton of the Megalosaurus, I think. Like I said, they based the full fossil off of just a few pieces or whatever. But the Megalosaurus has like an impact on popular culture, I think even like at the time, like when it was discovered, people were very much so talking about it. Like Charles Dickens wrote in his novel Bleak House that there's like the monster in that movie in that book is like based off the Megalosaurus. And one of three model dinosaurs to go on display at London's Crystal Palace in 1854. So it was very much so a famous thing. It like everybody was all of a sudden very interested in that, and that became the London's Crystal Palace was home to the first dinosaur park. And apparently, what was accurate was that the head shape was very accurate, but it was shorter. It was not 40 feet; it was 20 feet, and it walked on two legs, so it wasn't four legged; it was two legged. The head was right based off of like stuff they found with the teeth and stuff like that, and like the lower jaw. I guess you can kind of tell off of that. But yeah, sorry I've had such sporadicness, but I'm gonna close it out because I think I'm good now. But what we've learned in that time, in the 200 years since the inception of modern paleontology, is a lot. Like it's amazing to think about all the things that we thought of. Is at one times dinosaurs were once thought of as like evolutionary failures, where they were seen as these things that just died off and nothing came from them. But as we know, and as we've kind of seen, is that like they thrived 165 million years ago, and like humans are like 300,000 years. So like the fact that like we just don't know because humans haven't been around that long, but through discovery of these ancient like these bones and stuff of these fossils and a lot of the work that we've done with studying animals, we found out that there are connections, specifically with like birds, that birds are descendant from dinosaurs. So it's kind of funny to think that we've like that science kind of proved that statement of evolutionary failure wrong. And there's been around 1,000 species that have been like named, 50 new species each year. Science still in discovery stage. Like apparently, like it's still very like young with how paleontology is, which is it's unreal. But with like how new, Buckland in the 1824 paper, like how new it was at that time, and how it still really didn't even really catch up for years after that. Just technology and stuff like that, and like tools and stuff like that just wasn't advanced. But yeah, birds are descendants of dinosaurs. 10,000 species today suggest that many more dinosaur species um, have existed. Like there's 10,000 species of birds that suggest that there's more species to be discovered of dinosaurs than the ones that we've already discovered, which is just unreal. And it makes you it's just complex, man. I love that kind of stuff. Bridging the gaps in that way. And like I said, with new technologies, it's only allowing like greater detail, not only in like detecting where these fossils are with like sonar, but also like reconstruction. And it's just like, with even like more modern stuff, like some fossils have these tiny structures, these tiny molecules called melanosomes, which are like these little pigmented, like, things inside bones, inside fossils. And like they can tell color based off of like living birds. Like and they can see based off of like similar fossils or similar comparison to species and these little pigments they can see through these birds that have colors. And I love that. And I think that's kind of awesome. The whole thing is that there's not any specific determination of like how big all of them were and what sounds they've made. They've kind of like based off of some bones, that some are big. And unfortunately, there's like not a lot of complete fossils. There are some, but there's not a lot. So you can only guess on how big some are. And I know that we've kind of I've read some things that they've started like ingest or not ingesting. What am I trying to say? Like they started trying to figure out what sound and like based off of yada yadas. But we all never know because we didn't exist 165 million years ago. Humans are only like a few 100,000 years. So that's pretty cool. And like I said, like that's just one thing that led to so much more. And to think about the primitiveness of them finding these fossils and just not knowing what to do with them. And then it took one man just to ask that question. And paleontology is a really big study, and it's something that I always thought was really cool. And you know, my little sister, was always really interested in that kind of stuff. She wanted to do like human bones, like she didn't want to do dinosaur bones. She's like, she was at one time she wanted to do that kind of stuff, like bone, like the show Bones. Yeah, but reading articles like this just like makes me feel great, and like, and it's an enjoying thing for me because like I love finding out about history, and And when I get to find out about older parts of the world and how long things have endured and how long things have existed, it's pretty amazing. And I'm always willing to find out any information I can through any sort of source. And I try to double check, and I double checked, and a lot of it. I'm sorry that it was a little confusing in how I was talking about it, the sporadicness a little bit, but the information lies pretty true. And I suggest everybody go look at the Megalosaurus and find out a little bit more about the start of paleontology. Alrighty, friends, that's really all I have to say about that. Episode 48 done. I appreciate everybody for tuning in as always. If you want to listen to this episode or any of like my past episodes or any of my future episodes, I always make sure to upload on YouTube and Spotify under the Odd Thoughts podcast. If you find anything I say relatable or enjoyable in any way, then I always appreciate a little support. I have a bunch of social medias you can follow me on. You can always subscribe to my podcast. If you want to follow me on my social medias, I have a Instagram. I also have Facebook. I also have a Twitter. I'll make sure to link those all down in the description below, as well as any of like my bios, any channel descriptions, profile descriptions, any of that good stuff. But I always appreciate the chance to get on the microphone and talk to y'all. And I got a couple more episodes before I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go up to till 50, and then I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm trying to restructure the podcast in general and just trying to find out maybe, a new intro, still try to keep things looking the same. Just try to like, I don't know, maybe make them a little shorter too. I don't mind going over an hour, but if I can get it to an hour and talk about, things that are a little easier to talk about, a little more precise or something like that, yada, yada, yada. We're going to figure that out. I'm going to figure that out. Da, 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 da. But yeah, I love y'all. Don't forget to tell someone else you love them as well. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.